We are in the middle of the COVID-19 health crisis, and NOPE of Hillsborough will likely not be returning to assembly-style presentations for a while. That is why we offer the following NOPE student presentation online. We realize that our nation is experiencing a sharp increase in mental health challenges due to the stress and isolation associated with the coronavirus. We also see that the opioid epidemic continues within the pandemic. In fact, overdoses and substance-related deaths are on the rise. Our youth have more time at home, with many schools shut down or offering a virtual option, so adults need to stay in tune to what the teens and young adults in their homes are doing. Vaping and tobacco use might seem like a good stress reliever to many young people during these unsettling times. But be aware, please, that vaping research continues to show permanent lung damage can occur for many that continue to vape. If you or someone that you know is struggling with feelings of anxiety, depression, or any mental health challenges, please realize you're not alone. At any time, day or night, you can call 211 for immediate assistance with a mental health crisis. Be well, be safe, and be kind. Every day, at least 197 people die in our country from a substance-related death. 1 in 3 households has someone behind its doors struggling with a disease called addiction. And just last year, Hillsborough County Emergency Medical Services answered 1,323 overdose calls just in our county alone. And unfortunately, 280 of those people died from an accidental overdose. 180 of them were opioid-related deaths. Now that number, it doesn't even include those people who were drunk or high and caused a car accident where lives were lost. That number doesn't even represent the people who died due to the violence that's associated with substance abuse. That number is strictly accidental overdose deaths, and almost every single one of these people's bodies, prescription pills were found. Good morning. My name is Beth Butler. I'm a member of the Narcotics Overdose Prevention and Education Task Force, better known as NOPE. Joining me today is law enforcement representative, the school resource deputy from McLean Middle School, Deputy Norris, along with 2 of our family speakers, Laura Sun and Tracy Karathanasis. We are here to share some very personal and emotional stories, so please, we ask that you not talk, but we also ask that you not applaud between any of the speakers. And I know that sounds so unusual, but please don't applaud between any of the speakers. I realize there are probably several of you sitting there looking at me thinking, what could that woman possibly know about drugs and addiction? But unfortunately, when our son was just a junior at Alonzo High School, he was walking through Citrus Park Mall one night with a so-called friend of his. That friend offered our son a half a Xanax that night. He told our boy, "Take it, man. It'll make you feel really good." And our son took that half a pill that night. And he swears to this day that that half a pill led him down the road of addiction to oxycodone, hydrocodone, and eventually we found syringes in his bedroom. Our son was shooting up heroin in the bedroom right next to where his baby sister was sleeping. We were downtown at Drug Court one day, right on Morgan Street in downtown Tampa. I'm sure many of you have driven on that road. It was our son's 3rd time to be arrested. And I remember waiting for the deputy to walk him into the courtroom. And when he did, our son could only shuffle ever so slowly because he had shackles around his ankles, handcuffs on his wrist, and he was dressed in that bright orange Orient Jail road clothing. I'm sure you've seen it, either online or on TV. I remember looking across the courtroom at him and thinking, what happened? I mean, he was on the A team at Alonzo, top 10% of his class. Now, sure, like many of you, he loved hanging out with his friends. In fact, the weekend was our son's favorite part of the week during his entire high school journey. But our son crossed the line. He went from just having some fun and experimenting with some drugs on the weekend to becoming a full-blown person in addiction by the time he graduated high school. The judge was amazing that day. He allowed us to buy our son a one-way ticket. I remember the judge looking at our son and saying, "Boy, don't let me ever see you back at my courtroom again." And we flew him out west. He lived on the side of a hill in Swaharita, Arizona, where he had no access to his friends, no access to a drug dealer. You couldn't get down the mountain unless you were in a closed vehicle with closed windows because there was so much wildlife. And 9 months later, our son came home in recovery. And if you're not familiar with what that term means in recovery, our son has not had to crush and snort a pill or inject heroin into his body to keep from going into withdrawals for 5 years on March 13th. So God is so good all the time, because our son swears to this day that for everything that he put in his body over those 6 years of his addiction, in the throes of it, that he probably should have ended up on one of our boards. But by the grace of God, he did not. So unfortunately, our family knows way too much about the drama and the heartache that is associated with this disease. Now, while we're here talking to you all, as the men of Jesuit High School, we want to talk to you about 3 things this morning. We want to talk to you about breaking that code of silence that all of you seem to keep amongst each other. Step up, be the hero, and tell someone that can help if there is anyone in your life who is struggling with any kind of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol, vaping, marijuana, prescription pills. If someone you know is struggling, don't just stay quiet about it. Get them some help. The second thing we want to talk to you about is how just one time can kill, as in Hannah's story. Hannah goes to a concert one night. She takes 1 ecstasy pill. It's a form of MDMA. She starts to feel so sick at that concert that her friends take her to the emergency medical tent. They rush her by ambulance to the hospital, but it is way too late. And that young girl died at the age of 14 from taking 1 pill. The last thing we want to talk to you about is if you could look at that brochure that you were handed this morning and look at the left-hand panel of it for just a moment, you're going to see listed various signs of overdose on the left side, such as someone who might be overdosing could complain that their heartbeat feels really, really fast and it feels like it's going to burst through their chest, or they start hallucinating in front of you, or they might begin vomiting uncontrollably, or they say that their body temperature feels really hot, or sometimes a person on drugs overdosing, their pupils don't dilate and constrict in the normal fashion. They don't get big and small. If you ever are in a situation and you see someone exhibiting any of those signs, you need to consider it an emergency and use your phone to make the call to 911, because we're fairly certain that your phone call could possibly keep that person alive. We're going to start this morning off with a very short video.
He's not even moving. You don't think we should wake up his parents or call 911 or something?
Don't worry about it. You'll be fine tomorrow, okay?
I don't think it's right.
You know what he's getting himself into?
I really think we need to do something. What if he doesn't wake up?
Let's just go, okay? You'll be fine. I've seen this a million times. I'll text him in the morning, make sure everything's okay. Let's go.
Wait.
We have to get out of here. Just leave him.
We can't just leave him.
Then do what? Call 911, go wake up his parents, then explain to everybody how you got this way?
Make the call and dial 911. This is Jared Kirstein. He goes out with some friends one night, similar to the kids in the video, and while Jared is out, he begins drinking excessive amounts of alcohol. And then he starts taking some prescription pills. He begins to exhibit some of those signs of overdose that I talked about a few minutes ago. And the friends knew that they could not drop him off at his house in that condition. So they took him to a buddy's house, thinking he'd just sleep it off. But in the morning, when the friend tried to wake up Jared, Jared was dead. And 4 weeks later, the autopsy reported to his family that their son, their brother, had overdosed from prescription pills and excessive amounts of alcohol. Please know this, as you are becoming men for others, that you do not need to be afraid to ever make the phone call to 911, because our state, along with 47 other states, have passed a law called the Good Samaritan 911 Law. And what that does is, it protects you, the person making the phone call, and the person that you're calling for, who you think might be overdosing right in front of your eyes, from getting into legal trouble of any kind, even if you were also doing the drugs, even if you were also involved in underage drinking. So don't use that as an excuse anymore. Oh, I don't want to get my friend in trouble. Oh, I don't want to get in trouble. The Good Samaritan 911 law protects you from legal problems if you are calling to protect a friend. So if you're at a party, you're at a game, you're at some type of family reunion, and something is not right with someone in that building, in that room, tell everybody else to get out, and then you make the call. Because we're fairly certain again that that call to 911 could possibly save that person's life. I'm going to spend just a few minutes sharing some of our task force members' stories who unfortunately are no longer here to speak for themselves. This is Sierra Bradley. She graduates high school, gets a job, and starts hanging out with a whole new circle of friends. But she also starts to make some really bad choices. She begins using that form of MDMA that I talked about earlier with Hannah, called ecstasy, also referred to as Molly or Adam by the drug dealers. Now, Sierra's mom goes up to her and says, "Sierra, please stop this behavior. Don't you remember addiction runs in our family?" And Sierra says to her mom, "Mom, my friends, they've got my back. Everything's gonna be okay." But a few days later, she goes to a nightclub with some friends. And while she's there, she takes one ecstasy pill, suffers a seizure right there on the dance floor, and there is not one thing those friends could do to keep her alive. We found out that a day before Sierra died from her accidental overdose, she told her mom she was using drugs responsibly. The fact of the matter is, there's really not a responsible way to use drugs when you're using them for the sake of partying or getting high. This is Joseph McHenry. His mom was here last night during the parent presentation that we did. And Joseph is a graduate of Sickles High School, and he was enrolled in St. Pete College, looking forward to transfer over to Valencia College. But unfortunately, that never happened because, unbeknownst to the family, And let me just explain that this family lives in Water Chase, Christian, loving family. The dad's a chiropractor. The kids never even took a Tylenol for a headache when they were younger. He had started using Xanax towards the end of his middle school years. And by the time he graduated Sickles, he was so in the throes of addiction that he just didn't know what to do. And as you come off of Xanax, as he went through a treatment center to get some help, it causes suicide ideation, thoughts of killing yourself. And after a few years of trying to get their son help, he found a gun one day. And he drove to his father's chiropractic clinic. And Joseph took his own life. And the family knows that even though a gun is what allowed Joseph to leave this earth, it was the addiction to Xanax that caused his true death. Katie Golden, maybe you read about Katie's story recently in the paper. She was recently a Plant High School senior. In fact, this is her prom picture, just a few weeks before she was supposed to graduate. But Katie never went to Grad Bash. She never walked across that stage to get her diploma because she died from a heroin overdose at age 17. This is the last story I'm going to share with you. It's Spencer Foster's. He was over at Farnell Middle School as an 8th grader, and the Sickles High School football coaches couldn't wait for that young boy to join their team because he was a pretty big dude for his age. But unfortunately, Spencer never made it to his freshman year of high school because he was found dead in his father's house. And the family didn't even realize that their son had been taking prescription pills, and that day he combined it with alcohol. The tragic footnote to Spencer's story is a young girl who went to Farnell with him came forward 2 years after they buried their son and told the mom and dad that she had known Spencer was experimenting with drugs in middle school, but she didn't want to get him in trouble. She didn't know who to turn to, so she didn't tell anybody anything. She suffered from such depression and anxiety from not letting the family know or someone know that she withdrew from school. She ended up having to get a lot of counseling, but she finally pulled it together. And about 3 years ago, she got her GED, a nursing degree, she got married, she had a little boy, and she named him Spencer. You know, prescription pills can be so beneficial, but they can also be so addictive, as in our son's case. You know, we shut the pill mills down pretty decently here in Florida, but when someone takes a pill for the sake of just getting high, or they take the pill and they add an alcoholic drink into the mix, or a little vapey, THC in it, or maybe another synthetic drug, each one magnifies the effect of the other, thus increasing the risk of overdose. And that's why we're here today, to let you know that it is a federal crime to share any type of prescription pill.
Vape pens. This little device is a growing problem among students in Hillsborough schools and across our community. Using a vape pen might seem like it's not a big deal.
But I'm here to tell you, it can change your entire future. I'm Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Cronus.
And I'm Hillsborough School Superintendent Jeff Akins. If you're caught with a vape pen at school, you could face discipline or suspension.
And if that vape pen has anything else in it, like THC oil or wax, it's not only illegal, it's a felony, and you will be arrested. Having a felony on your record can be life-altering.
Your acceptance to college, getting financial aid or scholarships could be at risk. How will you go to school?
On every job application, you have to tell them that you're a felon. How would you get hired?
Some apartments won't even rent to felons. Do you want to live with your parents forever?
A felony is pretty severe. It's not something you're just going to deal with as a juvenile. So please, be smart.
Don't ruin your future over vaping. It's just not worth it.
Put down the pen.
Put down the pen.
Put down the pen.
You're now going to hear from law enforcement representative, the school resource deputy from McLean Middle School, Deputy Norris.
Good morning. I'm here before you today as a member of the NOPE Task Force. I'm also here for a few other reasons. I want each and every one of you to look around to those sitting next, beside, and behind you. As I look out into this audience, I see the future leaders of our great nation. I believe each and every one of you can accomplish any goal that you set for yourself in life. While working the streets as a rookie deputy, midnights in eastern Hillsborough County, I can tell you many calls of dealing with various situations in people's time of turmoil. But there is one memory that will always be etched into my mind. That was of a woman calling 911, pleading and begging for help because her teenage son's body was on his room floor, unconscious and not breathing. As one of the first responding deputies on scene, I'll never forget the sheer look of horror on her face as I began chest compressions to manually pump blood through that young man's heart. Sadly, that man died of an overdose. When an autopsy is performed in the medical examiner's office, the medical examiner or assistant slices a person from here to here, removing their vital organs for testing, trying to figure out why that person died. If you have ever been to an open wake, casket, or funeral, you begin to realize the reason why the deceased are dressed to their necks in their caskets. You don't want to see what their bodies look like after the medical examiner is done with them. I have seen a lot of death, unnecessary death, what I call silent tragedies. Every one of these young men and women up on this stage is a silent tragedy. There were many missed opportunities to save their lives. I'm also here to tell you Aaron's story. Aaron Fulbrook. Aaron was 17 years old, and he and his brothers and sisters were raised by their mom. There was a day a few years ago that changed the family's lives forever. Aaron began smoking weed, drinking alcohol, and abusing prescription drugs that were not assigned to him. His sense of judgment became impaired every time he used these substances. That is what happens when you use alcohol, marijuana, and prescription pills. Aaron hid his drug use very well, and his mom never suspected. His friends all knew, but no one ever broke that code of silence and told Aaron's family. What a bunch of missed opportunities. Aaron was caught drinking alcohol at homecoming and was expelled from school. Shortly after being expelled, Aaron was arrested for stealing and placed in a juvenile detention facility for 3 weeks. Eventually, Aaron was released to home detention with an electronic ankle monitor. During his stay at the detention facility and while on home detention, Aaron had to stay off drugs, and he committed himself to working on his recovery. One night, though, he told his mom he wanted to have a friend come over and hang out and spend the night. His mother agreed, so he went ahead and called and texted a friend to come over. But what he did not tell his mother is that he requested this friend bring some Xanax with him as well. During that evening, while the friend and Aaron were hanging around, Aaron took and decided to take Xanax and Oxycontin. Once again, neither drug was prescribed to Aaron. Around midnight, the friend realizes that something's wrong with Aaron. He's passed out and is not waking up. He tried to wake him up, but was unable to do so. The friend gets scared, so he decides to lock Aaron's bedroom door, crawl out the window, and leave the residence. The friend didn't take the opportunity to notify Aaron's mom, run for help, or make a phone call. He decided to leave Aaron with the pills in the room unconscious. A missed opportunity to save this young man's life. The next morning, Aaron's mom gets up and she gets ready for work like normal. She leaves the house and begins her day. She begins to become worried that she never hears from her son, so she starts reaching out to him via phone and text messaging. Aaron never responds. Sometime between 10 and 11 that morning, Aaron's mom gets released from work and she returns to the house. She's shouting and screaming his name, but he doesn't respond. She goes to his bedroom door, knocks profusely, tries to open, but realizes the door is locked. She goes around to the outside of the house where his bedroom window is, crawls into the bedroom window door herself, and there she finds him, lying on the futon in the bedroom. She sees her son's lifeless body. Already, he's cold and stiff to the touch. Because she is a nurse, she gets her stethoscope, praying that she can hear a heartbeat, but there is none. She screams out, "Aaron is dead," for hours. She grabs the phone and immediately calls 911. At this time, I'm going to play for you that call of Aaron's mother when it was recorded by 911.
My son is dead. Okay. Stay on the line with me, okay? Are you with him right now? Okay. How old is he? How old is he? He's almost 16. Okay. He looks 7 years old. They're taking him home. Okay. Is he conscious? Is he breathing? I don't believe so. I'm not seeing anything. The hands look mild. Okay. Is there a defibrillator available? Okay. Listen to me. Is it possible for you to get him flat on his back on the floor? I'm sorry? Can you get him flat on his back on the floor?
Can you feel her desperation? The shock, the horror of seeing her son's lifeless body laying there. Aaron is dead. His mother, powerless. She's a hospice nurse, so she has been around death and has seen it many times. But it's different this time. It's her own son. He's dead in front of her. There's nothing she can do. 911's been called, the paramedics arrive, and they pull Aaron out of the bedroom and start to work on him in the living room. They're doing everything that they are trained and they know what to do. They try to revive him. Unfortunately, he is dead due to the combination of drugs that he consumed. His mom is there watching, and she hears the flatline noise from the machines. Then the paramedics officially pronounce him dead. The police have been called, and when they arrive, they find this. Here's a picture of the crime scene. And yes, gentlemen, this is a crime scene. Because at this time, no one knows why Aaron died. Here's a close-up of Aaron's face. And although you cannot see the picture clearly, it was observed that a frothy foam started coming out of Aaron's nose and mouth. This is common in drug overdose death. Once the police were done with the crime scene, the medical examiner went into the room, wheeling in a gurney. On top of the gurney was a neatly wrapped package that they ripped open. What is this? It's a body bag. This was what they took off the gurney and put Aaron inside. The The last sound that Aaron's mother heard was the zipper of the bag zipping up over her son's body. To this day, that sound continues to haunt Aaron's mother. This is where Aaron can be found now, in an urn next to a fountain on his mom's porch. This is what his mom wakes up to every day and says goodnight to every night. This is where the family spends hours sitting and talking to Aaron and sharing stories about his life. This is the end result of bad choices. Gentlemen, life is about choices. Your choices are not always about you. We have shown you the choices that you make have everlasting consequences on the people you love and who love you. Remember, as you make these choices in your future, there is a Good Samaritan 911 law that allows you to be a friend to get help for someone in danger of overdosing. Don't leave a friend just thinking they will sleep it off. One time can kill. It is our prayer and hope that all of you make good choices and have long and healthy lives free of unnecessary tragedies.
As Deputy Norris shared with you, Aaron's use of substances throughout that night impaired his judgment so badly that he continued to make worse choices that resulted in his death. The individuals on the boards beside me, and that you've seen pictures of on the screen, almost every single one of them died an accidental death. In almost every story, they had no intention of dying. But you all know this, that every time you take a substance, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, the oil that's in the vaping pens, the e-cigs, the pills, synthetic drugs, and you start combining them, each one magnifies the effect of the other, thus increasing the risk of overdose. And you know that the drug dealers don't care, right? I mean, like, while we're sitting comfortably here in this beautiful gymnasium, there are drug dealers across our county and across our city in their homes using their bathtubs to mix up synthetic drugs, oftentimes laced with fentanyl. And over the past couple of years, fentanyl is something that I'm sure all of you have heard about, that just the slightest grain of it, the slightest inhalation of a grain of it can kill a human being. As long as they make their deal, they don't really care that you don't know that it's laced into what you're buying for your vaping pen, what people are buying for their heroin bags. They really don't care. But you're the generation that can stop this. And that's why we're here. There's got to be so much hope, because now that we've realized that addiction is a disease and it's not just a weakness, it's something that can be treated. You are the generation that can help break this cycle of buying, selling, using drugs. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet. And while you're standing, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. If the answer to the first question is yes, I'm going to ask that you remain standing. If the answer is no, I'm just going to ask that you be seated, and then we'll do the same thing for the second question. So if you could, gentlemen here of Jesuit, stand quietly to your feet, I'd really appreciate it. All right, remember, if the answer to the first question is yes, please remain standing. If it's no, just be seated quietly. Do you know of anyone who has ever or is currently using alcohol or some type of drug? And most of us do know someone, so don't be embarrassed that you know someone. Now, think about that person, or think about those people that you know. Did you go and get help for them? Did you go and say, hey, my mom is struggling with alcoholism, or my buddy is showing up higher than a kite at his high school every day, or my friend is having a problem with pills? Did you get them help? If you did, stay standing. That's great. If you didn't, don't be embarrassed. Just be seated quietly and let's see how many remain standing that got help. Take a look at these few people, and I think some of you sat down quickly because you didn't want to be singled out. You are the heroes. Let's give them a round of applause. You may have saved that person's life. You may be seated. Thank you. Not one person stood up for any of these individuals on these boards beside me when it really came down to the last minute of their life. And in many cases, they had people in the room with them when they overdosed and died. And that's why we want you all to break that code of silence, step up, and be the hero, and get some help for yourself if you're just starting to experiment, or if you're already in the throes of using a substance, or if you have a family member or a friend who is struggling. We had to get permission from all of these families, of course, to use their children's photo and their stories. And we found out, as we interviewed each family, that almost every single one of these individuals started experimenting in middle school. A few of them started in high school, but almost every single one of them started in middle school with either alcohol, marijuana, and a handful of them started with prescription pills. Addiction is a disease. And if you decide at this young time in your life, and this is a statistic that's out there, if you begin using this early while your brain is still in developmental stages, say for instance, every single one of you says, let's go out tonight and have our first alcoholic drink, or let's go out and try our first joint. If you did that, and I'm not suggesting that you do it because first of all, it's illegal. Second of all, it is so dangerous. But if you did, 45% of you would suffer with the disease of addiction at some point in your life. That's almost half of the gymnasium will suffer with addiction if you start using in your earlier years. And those of you that are science experts already know why. The human brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. So every single thing that you're putting in your body right now is affecting the development of your brain. In fact, let me share Jamie's story. Jamie is the daughter of our NOPE chapter president. She went to Countryside High School. In her sophomore year, she and 9 friends started hanging around together, and they started experimenting with different drugs. Every weekend, they try something different. By the time Jamie walked across the stage to get her diploma, she was so in the throes of addiction that she had to use 3 times that day to keep from going into withdrawals. What a horrible way to celebrate your high school graduation. Out of those 10 friends, 3 of them are now dead from an overdose. 2 of them are in prison for what they did to support their substance abuse. 2 of them struggle every single day to keep from using. In fact, one of them overdosed a couple of Decembers ago, and they brought her back to life with Narcan. The others, well, by the grace of God, they are doing really well. And if you were counting along with me, that is 7 out of those 10 friends of Jamie's, including her, that either died or ruined their lives because of using drugs at an early age as a sophomore in high school. I don't think it's a statistic that you want your family to have to face. I'm now going to invite Laura Senna to share her story.
Hi, I first just want to say I'm aware that there are probably several of you here today that know my family and knew Brandon and Austin growing up. And I just want to say I'd love to see you afterwards. This is my son, Brandon. His friends call me Miss Laura. He would have graduated from Freedom High School last year with the class of 2018. But sadly, Brandon never even started the 11th grade. He was born on Thanksgiving Day, November 25th, 1999. He is the oldest of my 2 children. Probably like many of you here, he grew up playing Little League baseball, soccer. He loved SpongeBob and Spider-Man, Legos and Star Wars, and Harry Potter. He was a happy child, curious, busy, and interested in everything around him. He loved to swim, play at the YMCA, go to Mosey, and entertain his brother. He was an avid reader. He loved going to the media center to check out books in elementary and middle school. His favorite was Harry Potter. He read all 7 of them in the 2nd grade. We used to run 5K races together, his brother and I. In middle school, he excelled in academics. He ran track. He studied computers and was a member of the Future Business Leaders of America. He was even voted most photogenic. He had such a great smile. He was labeled a gifted child, but to me his gifts were his curiosity, his thirst for knowledge, his ability to teach himself everything he was interested in, thanks to YouTube. He could solve the Rubik's Cube in less than 90 seconds, and he amazed his friends with his magic tricks and card tricks and coin tricks. He loved his PlayStation, video games, airsoft, riding his bike, fishing, and anything to do with a computer. He was so motivated, he taught himself to program and created his own website and business cards and had a little repair computer business. He would fix your laptops. The day 8th grade ended was a turning point for Brandon. I'm pretty sure the entire 8th grade class from Bartell's Middle School was at our home for the last day of school for a party that he had organized. I remember him asking, "Mom, can I have a party of about 20 or so people? You won't need to do much, I'll take care of it." So I picked him up on the last day of school and brought a few of those friends home to set up. And he got in the car and he says, "Mom, there might be a lot more people than expected." The word got out. At last count, I believe we had 75 to 80 kids in my house, all there at once. They just kept coming. I remember I collected all their cell phones when they arrived so no one would lose it, break it, or accidentally fall in the pool. I served pizza and soda and cake. It was innocent. We were celebrating all the kids going to different high schools. They played volleyball in the backyard and swam in the pool. He entered the 9th grade at Freedom High School with great promise and a lot of enthusiasm for being a freshman. "I've got this, Mom. Please don't embarrass me," he told me at open house. Sadly, that same year, Brandon's dad asked me for a divorce and left our home. This devastated Brandon, myself, and my youngest, who was 12. Brandon was 14. I know many of you here have experienced divorce in your own families. Brandon was angry and hurt and spent a lot of time with his friends, and he wrote about them in an English paper. He wrote that the connection and the love and the loyalty we have towards each other. And about the divorce, he wrote, "It really tore everything in my life apart from how I used to know it. That's why I became so strongly attached to my friends." During this time, he practiced boxing and working out at the gym. He got his driver's permit and eventually got his license and enjoyed the freedom that came along with that. Brandon was known for his love of all music, from Elvis Presley to country to dubstep and Chance the Rapper. His poster still hangs in Brandon's room today. Brandon loved the beach, sunrises, and sunsets, and he shared those experiences with his friends every chance he got. He took interest in people and was a great listener. He made everyone feel like they were his best friend, and there were a lot of them. He didn't discriminate. He was friends with everyone, everywhere. He had friends at Wiregrass, Land O'Lakes, Middleton, Steinbrenner, Sun Lake, Freedom, Wharton, and Kane. June of 2016, Brandon was working at Moe's, a burrito place. He had just finished the 10th grade, and summer had started. He spent Father's Day with his dad and brother eating at a local restaurant, and I am thankful for and comforted by that. The next night, Brandon and his friend came into my bedroom to say goodbye. He was spending the night with me, spending the night with him. At least that's what he told me. He gave me a quick hug, pet our dog Cody, and walked out of our house for the last time. I never saw my son again. You've heard a lot about addiction today, but see, Brandon was not an addict, nor did he have a drug addiction. He had a curiosity and a group of friends, just like many of you. I learned after Brandon died, they were pushing the boundaries and experimenting with drugs. The circumstances surrounding my son's death near the Skyway Bridge rest area that summer night are still unknown. But what I do know for certain are these facts. He lied to me about where he was going. He was with his 4 best friends. They had planned to camp overnight at a rest area on the beach and do LSD. And then something went terribly wrong. According to his friends, Brandon wandered off, he disappeared, and no one did the right thing that night or the next day. According to them, they looked for him, but they were tripping and they couldn't find him. The next morning, they packed up their tent, left the beach at the Skyway Bridge in St. Pete, and drove back to New Tampa without their best friend. They never called 911. They never called me. They never called his brother. They never told their parents. Maybe if only someone would have said something, or if they knew about the 911 Good Samaritan Law, Brandon would be alive today. On June 22nd, 2016, my life changed forever. His dad and I and others were at that campsite desperately looking for Brandon when the police stopped the search and informed us that a teenage boy, my son's age, had literally just snagged him on his fishing line off of the fishing pier. This was 33 hours after he was last seen by his best friends. I never was allowed to see my son's body after he died. 10 long weeks later, his death was ruled an accidental drowning. I wasn't able to identify him or see him at the funeral home. His body had started to decompose due to the exposure of water. A police officer came to my house and gave me this bracelet that Brandon was wearing when they found him. I've not taken it off in 2.5 years. I don't want any of your parents, your loved ones, or your friends to ever have to experience what my family and I have for the last 2.5 years and will for the rest of our lives. Brandon's life mattered, and so does yours. Your life matters to many people. There are 2 reasons I choose to tell Brandon's story. First is to help me cope with his death and to keep his memory alive. But more importantly, I share him with you because he was just like you, a high schooler, working, hanging out with your friends, going to McDonald's, going to the beach, arguing with your siblings, complaining about homework and bedtime, and maybe think your parents are too strict. And like you, dealing with peer pressure and trying to fit in. Brandon did not know or think he could die so young. He had plans and dreams for the future. His English teacher gave me that essay that he had written just a month before he died, titled Me. And he wrote, in the future, I feel like my group of friends, and he's referring to the same friends that were with him that night. And the things I've been through in my life are going to shape me to be a better person, and especially a better father. The same friends he had spent 2 years with, and the ones that were there the night he went missing and chose not to call anyone. Sadly, because of Brandon's choice to try drugs, he will not get that chance to grow up. My message and my wish as Brandon's mom to all of you here today is this: don't give in to peer pressure. Make good choices. Don't enable bad choices with your friends. Respect yourself. Respect your parents. Respect your teachers. We're not your enemy. We care about you and love you. We care about your future. Change your generation and break the cycle of buying and selling and using drugs and alcohol. It does not have to be a rite of passage. Your generation must be better than the one before you. If not, we as a society, in a country, and a community, we have failed, and we are all better than that. If you know something, say something. There is a quote from Gandhi, the great Indian civil rights leader. He said, "Make the choices today that you can live with tomorrow." Sadly, at age 16, my beautiful son Brandon and his friends made more than one bad choice that summer night that has changed all of our lives forever. I speak not only for myself, but all of us here from NOPE. Our wish for you and future generations is no child or parent should lose their loved ones due to drug use, abuse, and overdose. We hope our message heard today will save a life. Remember, your life is a gift. Treat it as such. Thank you.
We're now going to hear from our second and last family speaker, Tracy Karathanasis.
I'm Drew's mom. Are there any twins here? Twins? The most exciting day of my life was the day the doctor told me I was pregnant with twin boys. The best time in my life was taking care of these baby boys. If you've heard the expression double trouble, that was them. Before they could even walk, they would pull each other's hair so bad I had to cover their hands with socks. And then once they could walk, they were all over the place. One time I could hear giggling, and I said, uh-oh. I went to find them. They were in my closet. They had pulled all the clothes off the hangers, off all the shelves, and made this big pile. They were sitting on top of the pile, giggling. They thought they were so funny. Then one time I was making dinner, and I smelled this bad smell. I thought, uh-oh. I went to find them. They were in their room. They had taken all their socks and lined them across the floor. They had taken off their lampshade, and they were taking each sock one at a time, seeing what would happen to burn it on the light bulb. But they weren't all trouble. They were so sweet, too. They would sleep with their hockey gloves on their pillow. Drew would come up to me in the morning and say, "Mom, are you happy to see me?" And of course, I was always so happy to see him. Drew grew up a happy, normal kid. He lived with me, his dad, his twin brother, his little sister, and 2 cousins. We had a normal, regular life. We went to the beach. We played games. We went to Dairy Queen. We went on ski trips and vacations. When Drew was in 10th grade, he was caught with a baggie of weed in the car in the school parking lot of Alonzo. And he had to start this court drug program. And it was going to last for 4 months, and he had to go after school for 3 hours at a time. And after the program was over, the charges would be dropped. And so he was going to the program, but he was still smoking weed, and he failed a drug test and had to go back to court. So I took him to court that day, and right there in the courtroom, the judge said that he had to go away to rehab for 3 months. And the bailiff guy came over and just took him away. And I didn't even know where he was going. And they came back and they handed me his belt and his chapstick. And I was worried because he always had dry lips and carried around his chapstick. But we found out where he was going, and he did great in the program. He was actually so good and well-behaved that they once let him leave to play in a hockey tournament over the weekend. And I had to come and pick him up and then sneak him away, and then could bring him right back at the end of it. And at the end of the program, he came home and was ready to start back at school. He started a hockey practice that same day that he got back, and then the next day he started back at school. And that morning at 10 in the morning, I got a text from his cousin, and it said, "Something is wrong with Drew, he's messed up." And I couldn't believe it. I thought he was all better, and he'd never do drugs again, and everything had been behind us. But unfortunately, that was the start of him going through months of experimenting with all different kinds of things, with Xanax bars, Adderall, sleeping pills, cold medicine, A few times I found some baggies of just random prescription pills, and I would look them up on the internet to see what they were. I was being a crazy mom. I was following him, spying on him, grounding him, crying, begging him to stop. And during all this time, though, he was also doing a lot of good things. He went to school every day. He had A's in all of his advanced classes. All of his teachers liked him. He was playing still for his travel hockey team, and he was also playing for his high school hockey team. He played in every practice, every game. He was in an all-star game at Amalie Arena. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe things really aren't that bad. But he was still trying to finish that court program, and he failed another drug test and had to go back to rehab again. And so this time things were very different. So he went back to rehab, and he got very depressed. He wouldn't eat. He lost a lot of weight. And we were all really worried about him. So they let me come, and I started taking him to a counselor. He started taking medication for depression. And he was also completely worried and stressed out about that this was going to affect him getting into college. And so he was obsessed with studying for the SAT. And so they would also let me come and pick him up and take him to tutoring for the SAT. And I'd come to visit him when we had visitation hours, and I'd pull up and he'd be the only kid sitting by himself at the picnic table studying for the SAT. So after 3 long months, he finished the program and came back and was ready to start his senior year at Alonzo High School. But things weren't the same at all. He was very quiet, he was anxious, he was very ashamed. He was ashamed for making his mom cry, for making his dad upset. His sister was embarrassed to have friends over. It was hard for his brother. So his brother still doesn't talk about things, and he didn't talk about things then, but I think he was worried about his brother, but he was also really frustrated with him. I would hear him saying, what the hell is wrong with you? He knew how bad it was affecting our family. And so it was just a really hard time for all of us. And then one weekend, something bad happened. Drew had taken a bunch of cold medicine, and he was messed up, and one of his friends took a video of him and put it on Snapchat. And the next day, Drew was really, really upset. It was the worst I'd ever seen him. He was pacing around his room. He was like, Mom, what do I do? What do I do? This is awful. And I said, it's okay. I said, you don't even have to leave the house. You don't even have to go to school. I said, but you have to stop doing drugs. I said, this is what happens to you. I said, you just have to be around good people. And unfortunately, 3 days after that video was the last time we ever saw Drew alive. He had done his homework, and then at 6 o'clock at night, he went to take a walk. And then a few hours later, his cell phone was found in some bushes in our neighborhood in West Chase. And so I found out that the kid that he had been with said that Drew had been hallucinating. He was running around our neighborhood thinking that people were trying to kill him. And the kid chased him for a little bit and gave up and just went home. And that was a missed opportunity. Our whole family was home that night. The kid could have called any one of us and let us know that something was wrong. We searched for Drew all that night, and then the next day, I called the police and filed a missing person report. And then a little bit later, his twin brother found him in the back of our neighborhood in West Chase by some train tracks. And it was a nightmare. There were police, strangers, detectives, friends, all these people in the back of the spot. And it was awful. Our family will never be the same. Drew's, his backpack is still sitting by his bed. His hoodie is still hanging over the closet. I know in my heart that Drew did not think that he was going to die that night. And I was shocked when I got the autopsy back. I had thought that it was maybe from cold medicine that he had overdosed. And then when I got the autopsy report back, it said that he overdosed from the antidepressant Wellbutrin, and this was his own prescription. It wasn't his pills, because I would keep his pills locked up, and he would just get one at night. So I don't know where he got extra pills, but I had no idea that you could hallucinate from taking too many of these pills, and I'm sure that Drew didn't know either. And I don't know if he thought maybe if he took extra pills, it would make him feel extra better, because he was really going through a rough time. But it doesn't work that way. If you take extra pills, it doesn't make things extra better. That's what happens to lead to an overdose. And so I hate showing this picture, but I show it just to show the difference from just Drew's junior year to his senior year. At first, things were all fun and experimenting with drugs wasn't that bad, he thought, but then it was just really, really hard, and things weren't the same at all anymore. And things got bad really fast. And after Drew died, his counselor gave me back some notes that he had written. He would share his feelings with her, and I'm going to read a few of his notes. If your parents knew how much drugs you consumed to be happy, do you think they'd still love you? And thinking about how lucky I would be if I was given a second chance at life, because I know what I could do to avoid being whatever I am now. It'll never come true, but I like to wish it did sometimes. And this is the last one. If I could, I would show kids or tell kids how to not live life. I wish someone had told me before it was too late. And that was written just 2 months before he died. So that's why I'm here, is to be the one to try to tell you before it's too late. And if Drew was here today with you or went to your school, you would have been his friend, and he would have been friends with you. And I just hope you can look out for yourselves and look out for your friends. Thank you.
You must have been in a place so dark you couldn't feel the light reaching for you through that stormy cloud. Now here we are gathered in a little hometown. This can't be the way you move to draw a crowd. That's what I keep asking. Was there anything I could have said or done? I had no clue you were masking a troubled soul. God only knows what went wrong. You leave the stage in the middle of a song.
Imagine your mom standing up there and sharing a story about you next year. Or maybe one of your friends, family members, a brother or an uncle, sharing a story about them losing their battle with substance abuse. If you feel the need to speak with someone today, we strongly encourage you to do that. We have guidance counselors here in the gymnasium for you. We have your administrative staff, your teachers. Find someone to express concerns about perhaps your own substance use or abuse, or that of a family member or a friend. Because unfortunately, addiction, it holds no prejudice. It doesn't care if your dad makes $25,000 or $250,000. Addiction does not care if you speak Spanish, French, Arabic, English, Spanish. Addiction has gripped our nation, our state, and our county. And again, we implore you, as the generation, to stop this cycle, this epidemic of addiction and overdose death. So we encourage you to take a look at those brochures. Please don't leave them behind. And we have a vigil that many of you, several of you, have attended as a volunteer. If you're looking for community service hours, which many of you are, we are an entity within Hillsborough County that you can serve with us, learn more about this epidemic, help fight it, but also earn community service hours. On October 17th, a Thursday evening at Hillsborough High School, we'll host our annual vigil, which honors those people who have lost their lives to this horrible disease, but also those who live with someone still struggling with addiction, and honoring those who themselves are suffering from addiction. So we invite you to join us, whether it's to attend it or to Gaines Community Service Hours. You'll need to get it cleared through your career and college counselor. But more importantly, on behalf of the NOPE Task Force, we wish every single one of you young men a very happy, healthy, and long life, free from the disease of addiction.